Okay, Mr. Marshall, let's see, it is 6:34. Amherst Media is with us here. You are a co-host to this meeting. And I am seeing attendees come on over into the attendees, so I think we're good to go.
All right, thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of April 2, 2025. My name is Doug Marshall, and as chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, and further extended by Bill H.62 as amended by Senate Bill 2506, this Planning Board meeting public hearings will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is accessible on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting. Or go to the Planning Board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, where the Zoom link is listed at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Coldham.
I am here.
Johanna Newman.
Here.
Karen Winter.
Here.
I, Doug Marshall, am present. We are told that Fred Hartwell will not be joining us this evening, and Lawrence Klutz is unlikely to attend this evening, and Jesse Major is expected later in the meeting, so we will try to pay attention to when he arrives. Board members, if technical issues arise, we may pause to address the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment, and I will call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the general public. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not appearing later on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate by the planning board chair. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address, and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views typically for up to 3 minutes, or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. Okay, so time now is 6:37. And first item on the agenda is minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from February 5th? Did anybody have any comments on those minutes? Johanna?
No comments, but I move to approve the minutes from February 5th.
Okay, thank you, Johanna. Bruce?
I will second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anybody want to make any comments before we go into our vote? All right, starting with you, Bruce.
Aye.
Thank you. Johanna?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Motion passes. The minutes from February 5th are approved.
Doug, if I may.
Yes, Bruce.
I just thought I would actually like to register a comment in regard to our minutes. The fact that we so often do what we just did, which is to apparently perfunctorily approve the minutes. I want the record to show that these are not perfunctory approvals. These minutes are elaborate, thorough, and complete, and we read them. And because they are that, we mostly, not always, but mostly don't need to say anything. So Pam, and particularly, I just want to credit the fact that you do such a good job. And that's why it looks like we're not doing anything.
You all work so hard. Thank you.
Nicely said, Bruce. Okay, now we'll go to our second item, which is public comment. And I typically read the names of the public that I can see at this time, so they all know each other is present. At this point, there are 3 members of the public. They are James Paleologopoulos, Maura Keene, and Megan Rhodes. So just 3 members of the public. Members of the public, do any of you want to speak about items that are not on our agenda later? Okay, I guess I will. I still don't see any hands raised, so I will assume that there are no members of the public who want to make a comment at this time. Okay, moving to the third item on the agenda, advertised for 6:35, and the time now is 6:40, so we're in compliance with the advertisement. This is a public hearing for a site plan review. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2025-09, Amherst Youth Soccer, and the application is for something at Potwine Lane. So this is requesting a site plan review approval to install a prefabricated 10 by 16 storage shed on a gravel pad and accessed by a gravel walkway to the Plum Brook Recreation Area near the western corner of the parking lot. This is the recreation center or area is parcel 23A-9 in the RO and RLD-FC zoning districts. So are there any board member disclosures? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised, and I saw several heads shake no. All right, so Pam, it looks like you've brought over Megan Rhodes. Welcome, Megan, for joining us from your car, apparently, and squeezing us into your busy schedule. So you are here to make a presentation on your application.
Yes, yeah. Thank you everyone for having me. I'm a planner actually in Franklin County, so I'm in between planning board meetings myself. So thank you for having me. I am also the president of the Amherst Youth Soccer Association, and we're looking to put a shed on Plum Brook where we provide soccer to our local youth, to the towns of Amherst, Leverett, Pelham, Shutesbury, and Leverett. We serve provide soccer services for over 430 kids in our area. And it's gotten to be kind of a big operation. And so to streamline services, and because we're also volunteer run, we are looking to make our volunteers' job as easy as possible. So by having supplies on the field, such as the field liners, the spray paint to line the fields, to the nets to help line the nets, to put the nets up on the goals, to put the corner flags out every game, we're hoping to really centralize our operations and make things a lot easier by having that shed on site. So we are looking to put a 10 by 16 prefab shed on the field. It is 160 square feet. We went to the design review committee last week. They approved a design that will be all pewter gray in color with a gray metal roof. We're hoping to make it as nondescript as possible, kind of tucked away in the corner of the field, closest to the parking lot. We have support from the Amherst Department of Recreation and the Department of Public Works on this site. We've worked and coordinated with them, making sure we're all on the same page with this. So that's the overview. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have about this shed.
All right. Let's see, two of us went to a site visit. We met with, Karen and I met with Nate last, what was it, Monday or Tuesday? Karen, you have your hand raised. You want to do the site report?
Okay. I think it was really important to go to this site. I'm also on the design review board, so I wanted to mention that we certainly wouldn't interfere with a project that's going to make it easier for volunteers to do the job, which we're grateful that you're doing. But none of us on the design board were particularly thrilled with the appearance of this shed. And remember, we asked if there was any way that you could look into finding something that was a little bit less, well, that would blend in. And then on the site review, it was important because those fields are really so wide open that I like the idea of tucking it into the right-hand corner, but we all standing in front of it realize that it's going to be a big presence there in this wide open thing. And so we were hoping that one could maybe consider, I realize that on the side there, which seems unnatural because it would be, it would be sort of really tucked away, that's wetlands. But is there a way that one could get a waiver? Because it just would seem to us to be so much more functional. You would have it right there. It would be easy to access. And that beautiful broad view, I know that from the house across the street, but also from the people that are coming there, would not be obstructed by a very utilitarian looking shed, no matter how unobtrusive it is, because it is right there in front. So you really have to stand on this site to see that. And I'm sure you agree. I'm sure that you're trying everything to fulfill the purpose, and we would never stop you from doing that. But is there a way that we could still move it over? And I think Nate would be the one to talk about what steps one could take to do that. So yeah, I was surprised. There's no way that you can really get a reaction to this unless you're standing on the site to see that. And I hadn't done that, of course, at the design review meeting.
All right, so I would amend that report of our site visit. We got there, just the three of us were there. We stood on the sort of the northwest corner of the parking lot, pretty near where the shed was proposed to go. I think the thing that struck me was that it seemed like it was proposed to go right in front of the guardrail that's at the back of the parking areas. So that was I think why we all were kind of thinking it would be a sort of obtrusive presence. And maybe we were inaccurate in where you were thinking of it going. While we were there, Nate sort of described that along the western border, it's actually not wetlands, but it's in the wetland buffer. So it's not, it isn't necessarily prohibited to put the shed within the wetland buffer, but it would need to have some Conservation Commission approval. So that's my take on the site plan review for the moment before we get into the design discussion.
Sure. Would you like me to answer now? Respond?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I think we could go right into that. If you have any comments about what Karen and I have said, and then I see Bruce has his hand up too.
I would
Yeah,
just
so
like to see the plan, that's all.
Oh, okay. So Pam, do you think you could bring up I think it's figure 4 of the application?
yeah, I was gonna ask that as well.
Nate, are you sharing? Is that what happened?
Yeah, Nate has brought this up.
Thank you, Nate.
Okay, so, yep, so I see it's not up against the guardrail in this diagram. And it is off a little bit to the west.
Yeah, I was gonna just scroll down. I think the difference being some of the site plans are a little different. So this one, it looks like it is actually, pretty close to the guardrail. And it's slightly different than the previous.
Yeah, the one that I had looked at, figure 4, had it right pretty tight. So I guess the question might be for you, Megan, where do you have a specific location where you really want to put it?
I do, yeah. So I was going back and forth. I wish I know you guys were going out to the site. I would have joined you if I had enough warning. But I've been going back and forth with Amy Brzeski at the DPW about this. So it's definitely not in front of the guardrail. There is a figure that's a kind of a street view image that looks from the street, the perspective of the street. I don't know if if you could scroll to that image, but it's not in the site. It is, so if you're looking from the street perspective, you should not be able to see it from the entrance. It is, if you're looking at it from the street, it is to the right, kind of behind where the sheet screened by the bushes. So yeah, it's in that back corner there. It is, so if you go through the guardrail, it's going to be to the right as much as we can to the area that the Concom agent has delineated for us, where we thought we could do it without having to get a waiver. So it should not be visible from the street entrance. It should be screened to the side. My only hesitation with going too far closer to that area, the buffer area, is it does get wet. While it's not a wetland, it is a very wet, soggy space. And so I would be concerned about the long-term structure of this, having it be too close, because it is a fairly damp site almost all year long. So I'd rather to have it not quite pushed over so much.
So is the floor of the shed going to need to be at grade, or will things roll in and out that need to be, a continuous surface?
So we're going to put it on a gravel pad. It is going to be raised a few inches off the ground to make sure that it doesn't get wet, but we will make it accessible. And so the entrance itself will be at grade, so things can roll in and out.
Okay. And the yellow walkways we can see in these diagrams, that would be some sort of crushed stone or something that is considered an accessible path?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Bruce.
While we have this image, the central image, there's a lawn drain there, or maybe it's not a lawn drain, it's just
It is.
a regular drain. Where related to that is the building going?
Yeah, great question. So it's actually, it's behind the storm drain, just to the right of that.
So
Yeah,
kind of in that
exactly.
bunker that's there, there's a bunker.
Here.
Yeah, about around there, maybe a little further in. I don't want it to be parallel with that, so it's going to be a little bit tucked further into the field, away from the parking lot.
So in this image, I took these today. If I let me just go down. So this fence post, and maybe this is a better image. There's a few of these fence posts along the boundary. Those are the end of the mitigation area. So this area is left to be part of a mitigation for when they built this, the recreation area for impacts to wetlands. And so I spoke with Aaron Jock, the wetland administrator. So, anything that's within this mown area wouldn't need to go back to the Conservation Commission. It is riverfront, but given the size and where it is, it doesn't need any permitting. So it is wet there now. Granted, a lot of the site is actually kind of wet today. I'm surprised. So, here's the corner of the parking lot. So in the plans, I guess sometimes it looked at one point, it would be like right here, right off the corner, but you're saying maybe it's gonna be back over here.
Yes, that's what I was intending right there. Sorry, I didn't have AutoCAD to be able to draw exact plans.
That seems good.
Yeah, that's much better than we were envisioning when we were out there.
Yeah, much better.
Yes. Doug, perhaps I should say that whereas I didn't attend the site visit, I do have a grandson that plays soccer, so I'm down there quite a lot. I don't think that represents a necessary declaration of interest, but I am familiar with the site, and this does seem, particularly as you've spoken to Aaron Jock about it, and so in a sense, not the commission, but the agency has weighed in on this, so we have some confidence that the location is not going to be a problem from a wetland jurisdictional point of view.
Yeah. So
And as I understand it, the gable end is facing the street, which presents the diminished aspect to the street, which I think is kind of a nice thing to do, I guess. So I think I understand where it's going. It's going to go on a gravel mound. The gravel will be extended by way of a pathway, it sounds, so that access will be won't be churned up and so forth. I guess I could ask a couple of questions about the building. I think I understand that it's proposed to be a prefabbed shed. Is that right? You buy it. You're not going to construct it on site.
No, we're purchasing, it's a prefab shed, we're proposing to purchase it from Palmer Sheds. It's
Oh.
engineer certified, and will be delivered to the site.
But do you have to buy a horrible one like that? Or
No,
can you?
that I was asked to provide pictures of real world pictures of what it may look like. The horrible picture, it shows the gray that I was intending, but I couldn't find
Yeah.
one that looked exactly like that's a schematic.
It's these silly roofs that I don't like.
So the design review committee, we did discuss that, and I'm going to, first, the paint is all going to be the same color to blend it more, so there'll be no white trim. And then we're going to try to alter the roof line, so it's not that type. It'll be more of a, I forget the term that was
Shed.
of the,
Just
I
A
mean,
shed or a gable.
literally a shed roof would be two planes with with one peak running or along the length
Well,
of
that
the
would
thing.
be a gable. I mean, a shed roof would be fine. I was going to suggest that had you considered making the roof translucent. I know metal, this sounds like a good choice from an aesthetic point of view. But depending on how it's used and when it's used, I use the dump a lot where they have books. And the great thing about the dump, the Amherst transfer station book repository, let's call it that, is that it's got a transparent roof, and it's the light quality in that building is brilliant. You can read every title on every book on a gray day or anyway. So if you were using this primarily in daylight hours, which I imagine it's copacetic with being able to play the game, so mostly it'll be daylight. You could have a good light quality in there, and you'll be able to see everything you've got if you had a transparent or a translucent roof, and that would seem to be a good way of solving the lighting problem. Has that been discussed by anybody?
it has not been brought up. The design review committee did not ask for that. What they did ask was for a single pitch roof line, which I'm going to see if we can do instead.
Yes.
Okay, so it'd be
The
something like-
lighting, I will say, is not necessarily an issue. We only need to get into it a couple times a week. So it's not for extended periods of time. We just need to kind of grab bags and go. So it's not like we have to read things in it.
Well, we build sheds exactly this size for habitat houses. Every habitat house we built has a shed this size. And I have to say that even with a window and a glass door, it gets pretty dark in corners of that. And I often think that if we could do a better job of being able to see what's in there, it would be helpful. So, I mean, if I were building the shed, I would make it a transparent roof just so you would be able to see everything all the time. But I'm not prepared to condition that for approval. It just seems to be the logical thing to do. The only other thing, I guess, is the height of it. I suppose if it was a shed roof, you could make one wall 6 feet and the other wall could be 8 or 9 feet. And that would be another way to diminish the scale of the building by having the lowest wall 6 feet. You still get plenty of storage in there on the high side, but on the low side, you would have a diminished scale, which if that was the side presented to the street, it might diminish it might help it would help the building from a presence point of view.
Well, Bruce, all the diagrams we saw, I think had the sort of short end toward the parking lot.
Yes.
So the shed, I assume, would go east
So
to
the
west?
shed, yeah, so the high point of the shed would, to diminish the impact, would be on the west side and the low point would be on the east side. The shed would show,
Yeah, except I would think, you know, if it goes from 8 feet down to 6 feet, you'd want to do that on the, you want the high side to be on the east side from a user point of view, because that's where people are coming to the thing from the field.
that's true, unless they were coming from the south side, which is where the arrow is there. But I guess then the pathway would have to go all the way around the building.
Yeah, and I mean, what I saw in
It
the
was to have
diagram,
an entry. The idea was to have an entry here, and then an entry here, right on the two sides. Is
Yeah. Well,
okay.
you could do an end for end entries, I suppose. Anyway, I guess I don't want to get into designing the building too much. I'm just suggesting that to address the concern of scale, that's a design technique that I've often used because people generally assume that a wall has to be 8 feet high, but that's not true. A wall can be very satisfactorily 6 feet high.
So I am going to look into the single pitch roof line per the design review committee's request. My only issue is we're not building this ourselves, and so we're looking for prefab sheds. So I have to see what's available by the manufacturers, because we're a volunteer organization, nonprofit, and so I have to see what's within our budget that's already is available by manufacturers.
Well, I would think that the shed roof was a cheaper thing to construct.
Yes,
It
yes.
doesn't have nearly as much intricacy as the gambrel roof you showed. I see that Jesse's arrived, so we can, hello, Jesse. We can record him as arriving sometime before 7:02. Well, I mean, we do have the comments from the DRB, and I think I agree with you, you, Bruce, that that a simpler roof line would be better. Do you have any, Megan, if you have any objection to us conditioning our approval on the shed roof profile, and then if you find that it's a problem, that you can come back to us?
That's fine. Yeah, as long as I have some flexibility in case I can't. I can look around different manufacturers, but if I run into some trouble, it'd be great if I could come back.
Okay. All right. Let's see. The DRB also mentioned the accessibility and lighting. Bruce, we've talked about the interior of the structure, but Megan, are there any plans to install any exterior lighting, and is there any reason to do that?
We were not planning to. There is no lighting at the field at all, and we don't play in the dark, so I was not anticipating any lighting.
Okay. And then you will be providing the accessible path from the parking over to the shed. Will it go will it originate at an existing break in the guardrail, or will there be a new break in the guardrail?
So this is what I've been going back and forth with Amy about, and the Department of Public Works has asked that we don't cross that swale, they don't want any gravel near that messing up the drainage. They would prefer, the DPW has asked that the path would go from the shed to that swale and end there. And then for accessibility to the parking lot, they'll provide us a key to the gate, which is right there nearest the shed.
All right, Nate, do you think you could bring up your photos again? I'm not quite sure where this swale is.
Sure, I was gonna just, I was gonna share one thing here. So here's a picture of a shed, with the shed roof and cell story windows that could provide lighting from Lowe's, but
Yep.
just an idea. And then so in terms of the, let me just scroll down here, sorry. So it's not on these images, it was recently installed, the drainage. So the catch basin we saw, is here. And then there's this gravel swale that runs along here. And so, there's a 3 or 4 foot strip right here where it would be grass, the gate's right here. So Megan was saying there'd be a path to the shed. Something like that. And, probably not 90 degrees, but, so if we scroll down, here's a detailed one. So, it doesn't show the swale, but it's right here behind the trees.
So that swale is a gravel-filled trench at the moment?
Right.
And is it sloped to collect water along that length?
It's level with the ground.
Yeah, I hadn't remembered when we stood there, Nate, that there was actually a sort of valley running along the edge of the.
Yeah. So I can share this again if that's visible here. I mean, here's the swale. It's right here. It's just right here to the left of the.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it is level with the ground. It's like they had dug a trench drain and then filled it level with gravel to drain into here, and then it's piped out to the street. So,
Oh, okay.
so if we're looking back at the site in this image, you can't discern it. It's it's right with level with the ground.
That's a side entry drain head, is it?
Here?
Yeah. It looks like a manhole cover, but I guess.
Yeah, I think it's more like an overflow structure. I think this is actually, acts as like a catch basin to redirect pipes. It's not actually, I don't think it's working as a yard drain.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so maybe there's a pipe in the swale? Is that the way it works?
Yeah.
I see. And it goes in below grade into that, essentially that manhole.
Kind of like a French drain.
Okay.
Okay.
So to clarify, Amherst Soccer would have keys to this gate, and the shed would be located over here. And then from this gravel path or the swale, there'd be a gravel path to the entry of the shed.
Okay.
So Megan, why did Amy not want to have a little bit of gravel or a path from the parking area to that swale?
I think she's concerned about the sensitivity, having too much gravel close to the filling the French drain, the pipes. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I'm fine if we're going to be building this long of a path. We can extend it to the gate. I don't mind.
I'm just curious. I'm not going to press the issue. Whatever. If Amy's okay with that, then I'll defer to her. All right. Let's see. Board members, any more questions at the moment? I guess I will make a call for public comments if there's any public members who want to make a comment on this at this point. I'm thinking we're headed toward a motion to approve as proposed, with the one exception that we want to see a shed roof. That the applicant can return if we don't, if that's a problem. So I see Johanna and then Bruce. Go ahead, Johanna.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks for the presentation, Megan, and for your service to the youth in our town who play soccer. It's awesome. I know that a couple of years ago, Amherst Baseball built a shed at the middle school baseball field, and I think there are also structures up at the Mill River baseball field. And I'm just trying to figure out, my guess is we as a town don't have any kind of design guidelines for structures at our recreational areas, but part of me just like wonders whether what do the different structures look like at our different recreational areas that have been built over time? And is there some way to, as we're adding new structures, bring them into some conformity? And yeah, that might be more than we can, handle tonight. I think the Amherst baseball shed at the high school is also kind of gray and nondescript, or at the middle school, but wanted to just put that out there.
Nate, do you have any, do you know enough about those sheds to answer that?
Yeah, there wasn't no design standards. It's just, it is gray. Instead of having a gambrel roof, it's just a, like a center line, a ridge line. Maybe it's like, I don't know, like a 8-12 pitch or something. And it was just to be a standard shed. It wasn't, it may have been that they were put at the high school as well. And then the middle school and then Mill River, and they just may have been similar just because of, they're a basic shed model, and maybe they wanted to look like what was there. It's not a requirement at all.
Bruce.
And Doug, I just note that we have draft conditions and so
Yes.
forth. Do you want to look at those now or after public comment?
Well, I think we're pretty close to looking at them, but I haven't seen any hands from the public
Okay.
come up yet. The offer stands to all 5 of you who are members of the public listening to this meeting. So let's see, Pam, maybe you could bring up those draft findings and conditions. All right,
Hey, did you just take it?
I think he did.
He did, he
I'm seeing,
did.
I'm seeing Nathaniel Malloy's screen, not yours, Pam.
But you know what, that's good because mine is a PDF, so he
Yeah.
can,
And Nate can edit as we go.
that's correct, that's correct. I
All
just,
right.
I clicked at the same time and I was like, what is this? Thank you, Nate.
Sure.
Hmm.
So the finding is pretty simple. The board finds that the project complies with the relevant criteria of section 11.24 of the zoning bylaw. Any objections to that finding? All right, the waivers. Nate, do you have any concerns about this list of waivers?
No.
Okay. And scrolling up to the conditions. Project shall be built substantially in accordance with plans submitted to the planning board with a date of March 5th, 2025 and approved on April 2, 2025. Nate, do you think we have enough detail in the plans that we've gotten to do we really know where it's going to end up?
So yeah, in the these are somewhat generic conditions. One of this one, said the shed shall be no larger than 10 by 16 and shall be located on a gravel pad approximately 10 feet south from the corner of the parking lot and accessed by a gravel path. I mean, we could move that up front or specify some dimensions or area where we think the shed would
Yeah,
go.
I mean, it seemed like it ended up farther away from the parking lot than that. I just don't, I mean, without an actual plan, how do we, we want it, the shed will not be visible from the roadway entrance.
Doug,
It'll be west of that view shed.
I have a solution potentially.
All right.
Can we say that the location of the shed shall be marked on site and approved by the planner? Nate knows what we intend.
I think it'd be, if we want to say that the storage shed, I mean, we can, I think we would want to say something after this. We can say west of the emergency.
Edge of the line. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, no more than 10 feet from the edge of the mown lawn. I mean, put it up close to the edge of the lawn. And
Right.
And could I suggest something else as well in that
sure,
sentence?
Bruce.
I'll wait.
So for now, I'm just going to do that. Let me just.
Okay. I want to suggest that we say that it shall be a shed roof structure with a 6-foot high lower wall.
Well, I mean, can we really be that prescriptive?
Why not? We don't have plans. We're designing it here. I mean, if we had drawings, then we would be in a safer place.
Well, I mean, you're right. We can be that prescriptive. I shouldn't have said that. I guess I'm trying not to put Megan into a bind where, the only prefabricated shed roof structures she can find have 7-foot high low walls rather than 6. I mean,
We'll say 7 then. I'm just thinking of the concern that everybody's expressed for the bulk of this building.
well,
And I would
mean,
think
if
that these people will make what you want. I mean, they've got all their stuff that they stick out there to make you come and buy it, but they'll make you anything.
Less expensive if it's prefab and not a special order, though.
I'm not sure if that's true. If it is, then we can give grace. Well, that's my suggestion. We don't. If it won't be supported, then we shouldn't put it in.
Well, I do think we should be saying somewhere, Nate, that we want a shed roof profile.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do we say something which is a weak way of saying,
No, I don't think we should say that. I think we should say, we want a shed roof with the low wall. Well, I'd put it to the west myself, but I think Bruce would put it on the east side.
No, I agree. No, to the west. I mean, so where the doors are, you want it to be facing east. Yeah. You'd access it.
Okay.
Well, I don't agree with that.
That's what
now we've got the bulkiest aspect. If we relieve that, then let people walk out.
If it's up against the edge of the lawn, though, it's a part of the edge. I think I don't have a problem with that.
I don't think it's a problem to walk around it. I think you should try to make it aesthetically as nice as possible. And if you have to walk 3 feet around to the other side, that's not a problem. I think, I agree. It should look as good as possible, in my opinion.
So, yeah, so I'm just gonna go back here. I think if I think the shed, I think it'd be really silly to have the shed be here and have the shed roof like this. And this is wetter over here, have someone walk around into the wetter area to access the shed as opposed to just
No,
off the parking lot.
they do that, what you've just done, or for the second door. And the first door doesn't work all the way around. They walk into the north gable end.
Well, I'm with Nate. I think it's going to look like like somebody installed it backwards. And you know, having it up against the edge of the lawn, I think is going to be just fine. So I guess since we have a bit of an impasse in the conversation and we don't have any specific design from the applicant, board members, I guess I'll take a little vote. Let's see. Tell me whether you prefer to have the double doors on the long side, the facing east or west, the high side facing east or west. And so if the high side is facing east, the walkway would go right up to that side, and if it faces west, the walkway would go around to the other side.
Doug,
Bruce?
I will relent.
You will relent?
Yes, you mentioned double doors, and again, because we didn't have a plan, I didn't know that. But my
Yeah.
sense is that means that we really want to have the doors in the long side and not the short side. So that deep six is my my end entry.
Well,
So,
Bruce, I think, yeah, these images of the gambrel shed have double doors on the long side.
The building
I just think
commissioner,
I just think from a functional point of view that if you can go in on the long side with double doors in the middle, then you've got access. If you go in at the end, you're going to have just a whole lot of junk that you have to get through in order to get to the far end of the shed. So clearly the place to put double doors here is in the middle of the long side. And so that greatly weakens my argument only from the point of view of you'll get dripped on. So you could put a gutter up there and it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But I think if there's going to be double doors in that, now the image of that is going to be a big plane with a big door in it, and that makes it feel better than a small plane with a big door in it. So because of the double doors and thinking through what I just said, I'm now persuaded to your line of thinking.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Does anybody else feel strongly otherwise at this point? All right. So Nate, the shed will have a shed roof with the slope. How would we say it? With the slope
Sloping to the west.
to the west. Yeah. And then I think, Megan, you'd agreed that it would be uniformly painted uniformly gray with both, say, walls and trim and doors.
correct.
Okay. So. All right.
With a gray roof, gray metal roof.
Okay. Megan, is it a gray metal roof?
That is what I proposed, yes.
Okay. So the group, is it standing seam? You know?
It's a metal roof.
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be an agricultural metal panel. That's the
Yeah.
material it's called.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. That was not directly so solely directed at you.
No. I am being emphatic.
Okay.
I think we did well. You completely convinced me.
All right. Moving on. Nate, let's see. Let's scroll up here. Projects shall be managed substantially in accordance with the site management plan submitted to the planning board by Amherst Youth Soccer dated March 5th and approved on April 2nd. Substantial changes come back. Site plan review shall expire within 2 years. These are all pretty standard.
Yeah.
All work associated with the project shall be completed within 24 months. No exterior lighting. Maintenance and upkeep shall be the responsibility of Amherst Youth Soccer. Shed shall be locked. Public Works shall have a spare key for emergency access. Nate, do we need to say anything about the accessible path? I assume, Megan, your organization is constructing that?
That's right.
Yeah, the inspection services would verify that. I mean, we
Okay, all
we
right.
do say up here that the shed shall be accessed by a gravel path. I don't, if we wanted to.
Oh, okay, all right, fine. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. Okay, so we now have findings, we have waivers, and we have conditions. I'm gonna make one more offer for public comment. If any of the public wants to speak to this before we vote. All right, still no hands raised. So Bruce, you want to cobble out the motion or do you want me to do it?
I can do it. I think move acceptance or approval of the SPR 2025-09 Plumbook Recreation Area Storage Shed with the findings, waivers, and conditions as drafted and amended during the meeting.
And that we close the hearing.
Oh, yes. And that we close the public.
Since we don't always remember to do that.
Almost never do. Yes.
All right. Anybody want to second that? I'll second it. How about that? All right. Thanks, Karen. Okay, then still no comments, no hands raised from the public. So we will go ahead and vote. Start with you, Bruce.
I'm an aye.
All right. Jesse.
I'll abstain since I missed most of the discussion.
Okay. And then Johanna,
Aye.
Karen,
I,
I'm an aye as well. That's 4 in favor, 1 abstention, and 2 absence. All right, Megan, thank you for coming and good luck with your next planning board meeting or whatever you're headed to.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we'll look forward to seeing the shed out there and continuing your operations.
Thank you for supporting the soccer. Appreciate it.
All right, time is 7:27. And Bruce, how are you feeling? You're muted. You're losing your voice.
I'm okay. Thank you, Doug.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, next item on our agenda is a general housing discussion. First item listed is status update regarding the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. Nate?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. There's a document in the packet we could review. I sent the draft information to both attorneys at our KP Law who represent the town, as well as the Attorney General's office. And I don't know how long the Attorney General's office will take to review it. I sent that along with supporting documentation provided by the housing subcommittee. And so, we can go over that. Do we want to, I guess the question is, do we want to move something forward or start to agree on some points? I think that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seemed, I guess last time we were saying it's worth submitting this to the Attorney General to find out what they thought. And so you've done that.
Yes.
And so you're saying there's really no way to know how long they will take to respond to us?
No, that was sent to them, I think it was by the Friday after our last meeting. So it's, it'll be 2 weeks this Friday.
Uh-huh. Well, in your experience, do these things take a few weeks or do they take months?
So I would say normally a few weeks, but I'm not sure the workload given all the other towns that may be submitting draft bylaws for review, or if the person doing the review of the drafts is also reviewing the town meeting votes and other things that have been voted. So they did ask for it in Word document, so they will provide comments with track changes or make edits. And so we could wait a bit to the next meeting. I think that, to me, even with the KP law attorney, there's some interpretation that's happening with what certain things, how things could be allowed or not allowed in the bylaw. So I think that's a decision that the board or the town will ultimately have to make. Say, for instance, the rules and regulations say a property or a lot has to have at least one dwelling or one principal dwelling. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to allow ADUs if there's multiple dwellings. And so a lot of communities are saying, well, a single family home is at least one dwelling, so they only allow ADUs on lots with single family homes. I don't think that's a misinterpretation of the regulations. I think that's how some people are, interpreting it. Others will say, well, kind of like what the KP law attorney said, well, in some places they say dwellings, plural, but where they say, and so if you kind of read through the logic of the regulations, then you can allow ADUs, or you're required to allow ADUs on any property with at least one with dwellings, plural. But if I read it, it's really just at least one dwelling. And so it doesn't mean you have to require or allow it for, properties with an apartment house or apartment building or townhouses. So, I think those are the nuances of how the regulations will be interpreted. And I think there'll be some inconsistency across the communities. Other things like we have a condition or a few about design standards. The house needs to be compatible with the, say, single family home or principal dwelling. And that's unreasonable. In the guidebook and all the examples, that's not objective enough in terms of what does compatibility mean. And so, I think they're looking for specific, discrete language, same architectural style or same pitch to roof or, something. And I'm not sure, we don't regulate accessory structures like that at all now. And I don't know if we necessarily want to do that for ADUs. I mean, I don't know if we really want to, if you have a ranch home, do you really want a ranch ADU? If you have a Cape Cod style home, do you want a Cape Cod style ADU? To me, that seems, odd actually. And so,
Well, I mean, it seemed like much of our conversation had to do with the student home definition and the proposition that one or the other could be a student home, but not both.
Right.
And that was what I thought was going to be the most interesting to hear from the Attorney General on.
Right.
So I assume that provision was in the drafts that you sent to the Attorney General?
It was. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And well, I guess, I mean, I see, Jesse, you've got your hand up. You may disagree or have a different comment, but I would be fine with waiting at least one more meeting before we, spend time trying to finish it up and send it to council. Not to mention voting on whether we support it. So, Jesse, what do you think?
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I largely agree. I think we should wait, hopefully get some response. I guess I did have a question for those of you who've been on planning board for a while and for staff about KP Law and how council may or may not view their response. So when I look at what they responded with, it's basically taking away everything we added to go back to, no, we're not going to change what the state put out at all. Like, to me, it's the most possible conservative interpretation. And so this came up once before, and I think, Nate, you offered that, yeah, they're looking at it to protect the town from any possible litigation, which I get. But my real question is, how will, so let's say we did move this forward, and not saying we do that tonight. If we did, is council going to look at KP Law's recommendation and say, oh, well, we can't do this. KP Law said no. Or is that not how that interaction usually plays out? Do we have examples of like that over the past several years of how these things get interpreted?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, this would go back to KP Law as a zoning amendment, and so they would look at it again. It may be the same attorney or a different attorney, and then it does become a decision of staff or town council or the board, and it could be a discussion about what we think is reasonable to move forward that is not aligned with the attorney recommendations. And so, for instance, I think that they said to drop the student home definition. They think that there's a few instances in the regulations that would say why that's not a reasonable regulation. And I'm tending to agree. Whereas, for instance, the idea of saying you can't ADUs have to be on any property with at least one dwelling unit, to me doesn't mean that you allow them with apartments or townhouses or a mixture of units. You could say just a single family home. To me, that's an interpretation that isn't inconsistent with the state rules and regulations. I think they provided examples why the student home definition doesn't work, and they were able to cite specific parts of the regulation. Yeah, and so I think, but in the past, it's become this kind of discussion about, okay, well, how does a town or council planning board feel about it? So it's not necessarily that we have to follow everything that the attorney would say.
So let me ask the question slightly a different way. Has council ever moved forward with something KP Law said, we don't think this will fly?
I'd have to look back at that. Usually we want KP Law to say that something's clear, concise and actionable, or something to that effect. And so typically we try to get to the point where KP Law says it's say clear and actionable. There may be some disagreement about whether or not it's, say, unreasonable. So at some point it's a local decision to follow through with it. So there's been a few
sounds like
cases
probably
where, not for zoning purposes, say, but for other, like a request for proposal and some zoning amendments, say like Hugh Drive, for instance. We don't ask the attorney to say, do you like our standards and conditions? They just, we ask them to look at it in terms of, is there anything that's like inconsistent with Mass General Law? Is there something that just reads wrong, from their experience? And then, does it make sense? And so, for instance, if they said, oh, well, your setbacks don't seem to work for some reason, we would take that under advisement. Or if they said, you really can't allow this type of mixed use here, then we'd ask why. But typically it's our kind of local decision to move forward with that.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else disagree, let's say, to waiting another meeting or two, to wait and see if the Attorney General can get back to us in a relatively timely manner? All right. I guess I'll consider that consensus. All right, so the time now is 7:38, and we'll go to continuing discussions regarding potential overlay for existing apartment complexes. Nate, you sent us a bunch of material.
That was Pam, actually. No.
Okay, well, Pam.
Do you want me to bring those up, Nate, or are you gonna bring them up?
I have my screen ready. I'm not sure where we'd want to start or,
Yeah, there's a bunch of different documents here.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, I was gonna just get a few of them. Hold up myself. I think one, I'll share my screen. The board had discussed and agreed that this was a good boundary to start with. So, Meadow Street coming across here, including the backs of a few properties on North Pleasant, down to Presidential and over to 116. I think Bruce had provided a document about, what's the right density here. And I think it's a really good, good discussion and good topic. If we think that this is, to make this an overlay with infill development viable to have, quite a bit of increased density, is that something we think is appropriate here? And what does that mean? I think the discussion of affordable units is really interesting about having almost a designated area within the overlay where affordable units could be built. And some of that would be so that, a developer would still be required to either provide funding or work with a nonprofit developer to do the affordable units, but, they could be built in a way that they have a nice neighborhood and they're not dispersed throughout like we require now. And actually it could diminish, some of the kind of impact or the livability of those units, given that the scale we're talking here, right? So we're saying if there were 3,000 units here and we wanted 15% to be affordable, there's a lot of affordable units here.
Mm-hmm. So you've drafted, is this oh, this is from 2013.
Yeah, that's from 2013. That
Okay.
was, what's the name of that document? There's, I think it's.
Well, I don't know, it says 9/27/2013 Amherst Planning Board, article blank zoning multifamily, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that was done 12 years ago. And so it might be a place that you started.
Right. So, this one looked at, basically multi-unit properties across town and, thought, oh, well, could this be an overlay that, applied everywhere? And it didn't get much more beyond a conversation with the zoning subcommittee at the time. And so, there's some documents prepared, places looked at. And so, with the planning board, we had said, well, let's look at North Amherst as the starting point. And do we stay there? And I think, we've had a few discussions. I think it's a good place. We could talk about, are there other places? To me, I don't think we'd have an overlay that would cover all different areas in town and be able to do it with a very similar kind of standards of, dimensional standards or other things. And so I just, this is it's a useful document. I think it has, information densities, units. I think it's good to look at, but for a frame of reference, do we think we can take some of this and apply it to North Amherst, or do we want to start looking other places? I will say we have mentioned East Amherst as a potential area, and I think that's still something that, could be looked at, maybe not. We kind of determined North Amherst, but I think East Amherst is another logical place to.
Yeah. Out Belchertown Road.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Bruce and then, sorry, Jesse and then Bruce. Jesse, you just muted yourself.
Thanks. Over the past few weeks since we talked about this last, I've driven by quite a few times. I still think this is a great way for us to start the next overlay location. And I think it's relatively simpler than some of the others, depending what we want to try and accomplish. But if the goal is really just increasing density, I really think there's a way we can use this outline and not really change the North Pleasant Street experience very much. and push most of the density toward the west from these big lots. So yeah, I'd really encourage us to focus on this and try and get some parameters on what we're thinking.
So Jesse, does that mean you would have a pretty large setback from North Pleasant Street, or?
I think this came up last time. I could easily imagine not a large setback, but keeping the height or relative scale of what's there right now for some amount of setback. And then beyond that distance from North Pleasant, you could potentially get taller, more massing, whatever, however we're going to describe it, was what I was thinking about.
Okay. Bruce.
I agree with everything that you said, Jesse. I was going to say exactly the same thing on all, I think, 4 of those points. A good place to start. It solves the problem we're trying to solve at the moment primarily, which is primarily student housing. It's a good location for that. I think this does give us an opportunity to make considerable density if we choose, because the land falls to the west. I did get out the USGS maps. Nate, I wasn't able to access the topographical data on the town's website. I might have to get you to help me with that. They just wouldn't let me get in. So I went back to the old tried and true and pulled out my USGS maps. There's a 20-foot drop from North Pleasant Street down to the lower side of where the ends of those houses are. This is basically 3 stories of residential construction, maybe 2.5. So I think we could. It just says what we already kind of think we know, which is that you could build 2 or 3 stories higher down in the western end for the same effect as if we were building an equivalent story height. 3 stories less than the equivalent story height further up or in that location if it was a level horizontal site. So the topography is working very well for us here. I think that the setback thoughts that we might have along North Pleasant Street, I think you said this as well, Jesse, that we could have setback lines that limited story heights, and so that basically as you looked out from North Pleasant Street, you tend to see something similar. Although I have to say, in the great scheme of things, it might be nice to have a few things that stick up a little bit. It might give some massing interest than having a uniformly even horizontal roof line. So we could give some thought to that as well. But by and large, I think this is it's really this is one of those seemingly rare situations where it seems to me that the dominoes, so far anyway, as far as we can tell, they're all falling in the right direction, and it's rather something of a gift potentially if that's true. So I'm very much persuaded that we should concentrate on this site as our next effort for an overlay application. Do it as well as we can, get it finalized, and hopefully complete as we've done with U Drive and University Drive, and then use this as a template, or at least as a basis for thinking about other equivalent sites in town that are like this, but obviously will be different in certain respects. But I think it's a good idea to concentrate and develop our template on this site, because I think this one looks like it's going to be able to grow the best crop for us in terms of a solution concept to our immediate housing problems.
All right. Karin or Johanna, any other thoughts from you all?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Karin.
First. I agree. I'm excited about putting density in here. I like the idea of varying it. This is really a good location to be walking and be without cars. It's very desirable. I don't think we would have too much resistance if we plan it, if we open it up, and I think we should explore larger buildings as well. So I agree with Bruce.
Okay. All right, so,
John,
for
can I
picking up,
chime in really quickly?
oh yeah, I don't
Thanks.
see your hand. Okay,
Um, in general, I agree. I think I've been pretty supportive of the idea of adding density to this. I will say I, like Jesse, have done a couple of drive-bys of this area, and the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause that I wanted to just talk about as a board is I feel like we are, if we move forward here and if it manifests itself, we end up like leapfrogging density instead of concentrating density. So let me explain what I mean by that. Like when you're at the Rotary on the north end of the UMass Amherst campus, there are buildings there that are 4 to 5 stories tall. And then on the north side of that Rotary, you end up with very small single family homes on basically, individual lots. And if we move forward with this, basically what we end up with is like density on the college campus, then a mile to a mile and a half of relatively low density, then a bunch more density, then again, kind of more low slung, and then you get to North Village, and once again, you have more density. And maybe we're fine with that. And maybe that's the best we can do. And, this is kind of like the path of least resistance. But if I were, like starting from scratch, I would be more inclined to concentrate the density so that, right, like right now, this is too far away for these students to conceivably walk to campus. They could bike and they can take the bus, but it's a little far to walk. So that's like my one kind of like moment of pause.
well, would you not extend this as far north, or would you extend it south to include all the way to campus? I mean, we all know there's a residential neighborhood between this area and campus.
There
And,
definitely is, right?
and
it's
I don't know what the distribution of students versus long-term owner-occupied houses is in that neighborhood, but I'm pretty sure there's a number of owner-occupied houses.
My
You know,
sense just from driving around it is that a lot of it is owner occupied and that it seems to be a pretty, I don't know, like well established, like
yeah,
it's a nice little neighborhood.
right.
So
So I think it's like, do we want to advocate to council to allow some pretty disruptive development to happen in that area?
I think probably a path of least resistance is going to be easier, but
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're headed, but I mean, I get what you're talking about. I mean, for the greatest good for the greatest number, it's probably not quite this. But okay, Bruce.
On that point, perhaps we should bear in mind that 2 miles or 3 miles north in Sunderland, there's a huge aggregation of student housing. And the bus transportation seems to work fine. So I think compared to an already solved problem in Sunderland, this is an improvement. So I wouldn't be so troubled as Johanna on this matter. I raised my hand to say that during the DONA, which is the District 1 Neighborhood Association meeting a couple of Sundays ago, it's the 6 monthly meeting that districts have with their 2 councillors. And at the end of the meeting, during the question and commentary time, I just stood and told everybody was, I suppose it was about 20 or 30 people in the room. And I said that the planning board was beginning discussions not entirely dissimilar to what we've already been conducting on University Drive so far as a district defined overlay is concerned. In this area in North Amherst, and the conversations were beginning about this. I said what the purpose and objectives were, and I said that these are public meetings, and I invited people in the room to be interested and to join those conversations, certainly if they felt they had time. So I thought it was appropriate, given the fact that we've begun public discussion of this topic, to tell people in the neighborhood that. And at the end of the meeting, Barbara Puffer, who owns the Puffton Village, which is right in the middle of this, came up to me and expressed her generally positive attitude to what we are considering here. But she did say, and this is something we've already borne in mind, I think, she said, you really should talk to Steve, her manager of the Puffton Village, because she says he has concerns about increasing densities and so forth there. And my sense is that it would take a different management structure with what we're talking about. But nonetheless, here's a fellow who's been running this Puffton Village for a long time, who's got a lot of experience, and I'm sure we can learn, or whoever decides to do whatever they want to do in this area after we complete whatever we are trying to complete here. I think having a conversation with Steve and others in that who are responsible for these various apartment complexes would be helpful, but particularly the fellow in Puffton Village, which is the biggest aggregate of housing, and I think who's been there the longest.
Nate, is that something that you guys ever do, is to reach out to the managers of these complexes?
I think the rental permit program does more, but after the last meeting when we talked about this, it sounds like we are, serious about North Amherst. So I think I can work with Rob Mora and reach out to a few of these property owners and managers and meet with them to talk about this.
Is there any reason why someone like me should not do that? Should I refrain from trying to talk, or is it quite the opposite?
No, I think it's fine. I think sometimes we, as staff, we would say, we wouldn't want a property manager to then field, questions from different planning board members. So Bruce, if you want to do that, I wouldn't want to say then Jesse too, and then someone else. And there's a concern that then there could be a serial conversation that could violate open meeting law. So that's one reason, and also just for the fact of burdening an individual. But if you want to, Bruce, that's fine. I think staff would still reach out to,
well, I should say that I've had repeated conversations with this fellow, maybe 5 times in 7 years, raising money for the North Amherst Community Farm, of which I'm president. And Steve has always valued the work that we do across the road and has always contributed. So to that extent, we have a good relationship. I don't think it's one that represents a conflict, but I certainly would declare it as I've just done.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Well, I mean, I suppose, Bruce, I'm fine with deferring to you if you want to contact them and talk to them.
Well, Barbara suggested quite clearly that I don't know whether she meant me personally, but she kind of did, because I was the person in the room at the time.
Right. All right, Jesse.
Thanks, Doug. 2 points that were raised just now. One, I think the neighborhood, we should not try and overlay between here and campus. I know several owners who live there, and I think it is a pretty well-established neighborhood. I think that would get a lot of, pretty problematic. And to your point, Johanna, about sort of, what did you call it, leapfrogging? I agree, and that's kind of what I like about this idea of having it graded, or the height graded, or appreciating the slope, as Bruce pointed out, because I don't think the experience of going along North Pleasant, I think we can accomplish this without changing that very much. Yes, there'd be a lot more people there potentially, but in terms of just the architectural or massing experience of going around North Pleasant and Meadow Street might not be very different.
Okay. So when, Jesse, when you talk about stepping up to the west, you know, I'm interested in having an opening offer. You know, are we talking about, you know, say three stories along North Pleasant Street for the first, you know, 150 feet or 300 feet or whatever it is?
Yeah, so,
And it goes to 6 stories, or what kind of numbers did you have in mind?
I didn't quite appreciate the amount of slope that Bruce pointed out. And I was thinking moving from 2 or 3 at the front. I wasn't sure what it is right now. I don't know if they seem to be mostly 2-story right now.
Yeah, there, I think,
And so maybe moving from 2 to 5 or 6 at the back. And so essentially it'd be a horizontal flat almost, adding in what Bruce was saying. And I didn't do the math. I mean, Nate, you can help us with that, and maybe the boundary, you know, there's almost a natural boundary already with Brandywine Drive, looking at the map here. I don't know what the right distance is of feet from North Pleasant to not feel a big presence of a suddenly going from 2-story to 4-story, for example. Should that be 150 feet? Should it be 300 feet? I don't have a good sense of that.
right. And, you know, I think the lot coverage and building coverage is something we're going to want to talk about, and including the parking requirements.
Yeah, I mean, what was the number, Nate, about what we thought it would be worth for investors or developers? Was 3 times density, or was it 2 times? I can't remember.
3 times the density.
Yeah. So maybe, again, I think you're probably the best qualified to sort of piece that together for us to say, here's the type of elevation or stories needed to get there with this kind of scheme.
Well, and the lot coverage is also part of that. If you
Yeah.
can, you know, have a lot more footprint.
I mean,
Yeah, looking at, like, say, Puffton, it's if you went up to 4 floors and allowed density, I feel like you could double, you would triple the density without necessarily having, you could double it pretty easily just by increasing the floors. And then if you had a different site layout and flexible parking and dimensional standards, you triple it without necessarily having, really tall buildings. It's not true for every property, but it makes it easier if you can have some variation in height. Yeah, I mean, I think a starting point of 3 floors or 2 floors and a 3rd floor under the roof, or something, some kind of standard like that along the street, and having some stepping, having some height increases as you go back.
One other group that we might want to talk about or touch base with would be the Amherst Police Department, since I assume they are the primary responders during the Barney blowout and other sort of events where students congregate in this area, and we have problems with behavior. Do they think we're nuts to propose to double or triple the number of people in this area? From a public safety point of view. All right, well, I don't see any hands. Nate, do you think you could draft something for us to react to in the next couple of meetings, or is this...
Yeah, I've been focused on the ADUs and University Drive and a few things. I think I can turn my attention to this now, and I think some of the comments about contacting APD and possibly even UMass, and a few others, and looking at some of the doing some cross sections and just some ideas. We can get that moving.
Okay. I see that Janet Keller has her hand up, so why don't we bring her over, Pam? And Janet, you know the drill. Give us your name and your street address in case we've forgotten. Hello.
Janet, can you unmute yourself?
Now that I see the unmute.
There you are. You're unmuted.
Okay, thanks. So, as maybe no surprise, I look at it a little bit differently than you all. I have spoken to some people, but an unusually large number of people have other meetings, so aren't here tonight, who share my concerns for the potential impact on a few things. Traffic impacts, that five-way intersection is already incredibly congested for the 7 months a year that the students are here. And it's already very congested at peak times. But it's also takes a long time for traffic to get through even at non-peak times. I hope so I like Belchertown a lot better than I like North Pleasant Street and Meadow Street for this kind of increase in density. I think some of the ideas that you spoke of tonight that I haven't heard before are interesting, but the 3,000 more units, I think that's way too many. I also think the impact on the function and look of the adjacent buildings, in particular the Fisher Home and the National Register Historic District, worries me a lot. As to being primarily student housing, we are already in these neighborhoods. We're just trying to live like normal human beings here. And we have to accept that on weekends, the police and the fire and the emergency people are going to be concerned with the students. And woe to us if we have a need for their services. So we're already dealing with a lot of negative impacts, and so yeah, thank you for the chance to tell you what's on my mind and the minds of others here. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. All right, so there's some food for thought. You know, one of the things, I guess I'll just sort of mention, after Karin and I had our site visit at the soccer field, we went down to Amherst to Atkins Corner, and you know, we're looking at the site for the hearing that we're going to continue next time. So I'm not going to get into that discussion, but there, you know, there was a lot of traffic running on Bay Road across east to west in that area. And I know from my travels around town, I have seen that several of the intersections do back up around the university toward 5 o'clock when everybody's kind of leaving town. And one thing that occurred to me while Janet was talking was, you know, probably a pretty high proportion of the traffic around that time is students going to their distant lodgings. So if the students were closer to campus and didn't have to drive or had a pretty short drive to get home, it might actually alleviate some of the traffic issues that we have throughout town. Now, I'm sure there's other ways to look at that. So, you know, but that just is a thought that goes through my head while we're having this conversation. Jesse.
Yeah, I was going to comment similarly. I feel fairly confident students who might live in this new area we're discussing are not going to drive to campus. So it eliminates that number of cars on the road, potentially. Is
Yeah.
basically what you're saying. I do think the emergency services is a significant concern, as that Janet brought up, and obviously that would have to be part of whatever planning happens.
Okay. Karen.
Yeah, and if there's any way that we can somehow incorporate a big dedicated bicycle path, I keep thinking maybe there should be a little electric vehicle thing back and forth. We have to somehow really think about moving away from all this cars, traffic, and this is a good opportunity, but that somehow has to be sort of thought out. How can we have this campus turned into much more of a bicycle walking kind of a campus?
Yeah, certainly this area is a prime candidate for a good bicycle lane. Bruce.
There was discussion about, I think Nate, you may have brought this up about a bicycle way or a throughway, a pedestrian bicycle way on the western side of that property that could have gone all the way to campus. And I think you mentioned, or someone mentioned, that there were resistance among owners and so forth of the site. But my thought is that we should resurrect that conversation, because it might track differently in the context of what we're discussing. But it certainly would be the logical, it seems to me, solution concept to what Karen is suggesting, which is also the logical solution concept, or one of them, to Janet's concerns, which are real. I know that will be a concern in the neighborhood. I know that the intersection at North Amherst and the issues, the neighborhood will be concerned that this will be excuse for Guilford to put in a roundabout, which nobody in North Amherst wants, and can't understand why anybody could think it was a good idea. But nonetheless, it seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. So that will be something that we will probably find will get folded into public concern on what we're talking about. And to the extent that we can thoughtfully deal with that concern by the comments that Jesse and Karen and Janet have made, I think it'll strengthen the viability of what we're trying to generate here.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Pam, I'm still seeing Janet's hand up. Do you think she wants to speak again, or is she finished?
That was a new hand. Sorry.
That is a new hand? Well, I guess why don't we bring her back over?
It's not a big crowd.
Hi, Janet. Can you unmute?
Sure, that was an unintentional new hand. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But
You're welcome.
you've got 2 minutes and 58 seconds.
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, the time is 8:12. Nate, I think we've charged you with drafting something for us to take shots at. And maybe we should take our 5-minute break and then come back for a short, or should we just plow through the rest of the, I'm seeing heads shaking or nodding yes for that.
I might take my 5-minute break and I might run it out.
I think we're not going to take a break, but Bruce, thank you very much for sticking with us.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Bruce.
Okay, time is 8:13. We'll move on. Old business, anything not reasonably anticipated?
None from me. Nate?
Not from Nate, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, and anything for new business?
None from me, but maybe Nate?
No, I think, just so everyone remembers, here, Lawrence has decided to step down from the board. And so there'll be a vacancy there. So that's something that was, just, announced earlier this evening. He sent an email. So,
Right, it was about 5:45, so. So I see Pam Rooney is in our audience, and so she's getting a advance notice that we're gonna have 3 vacancies that probably need to be filled for this upcoming interview season. Pam, I see your hand.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, Pam. This is Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. Thanks, Doug, for noticing me. Yes, the Community Resources Committee is in the process of just updating guidelines for selection and interview questions and so forth. We'll be talking about that, in fact, on the 10th. And I'll just say I'm very disappointed that Mr. Klutz stepped down because, in fact, the council selected him over another candidate who seemed very interested and willing. So that's too bad. But yes, and for the 2 existing board members whose terms finish, it is not that someone does not want to see them renew or be reappointed. It is that by charter and by the council charter, we are required to view an ending of terms as essentially as a vacancy, and you get to go through the interview process again. So Jennifer Taub and myself will be reaching out to current members whose terms end this coming June, and we will ask if there is interest in returning, and we will put together an interview selection pool, and we'll talk to folks and make recommendations to the council. So that's the process, and thanks, Doug, for letting me address that.
All right, you're welcome, Pam. All right, we'll move on. Form A&R subdivision applications, anything?
None tonight.
All right, how about ZBA applications?
I don't have any to report either.
Okay. Upcoming SPP, SPR, SUB applications.
I'm not aware of new ones. Nate, are you? So we will have the Gould Lannon project come back on the 16th. Is that it?
and,
Yeah.
and there's a preliminary subdivision was filed again
Oh,
for
right,
Shrewsbury
right.
Road. So,
Yeah.
It was over 7 months ago, about 8 months ago, there was a subdivision plan filed for Shrewsbury Road where there's the proposed solar development that's going through the zoning board, and they resubmitted the same plan. So they didn't, they're basically their 7 months expired to submit a definitive plan, so they resubmitted the same preliminary plan. So that'll also be reviewed on the 16th.
Okay. Okay, board and committee and liaison reports. Bruce has departed. He, I think, said he didn't have any report for PVPC. Jesse, anything you want to say about the housing subcommittee?
We haven't met. We're working on it.
Okay, and Karen,
Yeah, we
ERB, anything else other than the shed?
yeah, mostly we were concerned about the shed, which I reported on. There's one other signage that we asked to come back and approve a little bit, just so nothing major.
Okay. All right, I don't think I have any report of chair. Nate and Pam, anything from staff?
I do not have anything I'm going to say, but Nate?
I think that just a few things. The housing production plan, there's draft goals and objectives that are being updated by the consultant, so staff looked at them, and I think probably at the end of April or early May, the board will have a chance to look at that for the housing production plan, and then provide comments to the consultants, and then probably in June we'll have the full plan back, or draft plan, in front of the board, and so the planning board needs to vote to send that off to the state for a final review. It will also go to town council. So in the next month or so, I think we'd have a discussion about the goals of the housing production plan. And so, yeah, I think, once that gets available, we'll send it out to everyone and we can have a conversation. I'll just say that the plan doesn't obligate the town to do anything. So it has, big themes, a lot of goals, a lot of strategies, some we may not, people may not like or disagree with, but I think it's, the consultants putting out there what they think are some ideas to address the housing in Amherst. And yeah, so we've asked them to, be creative and come up with some ideas we think can work for the town.
Great. All right, time is 8:19. And if anybody, do we have anything else to talk about this evening? All right, I guess I will declare us adjourned. See you all on the 16th.
Thank you very much. Bye.
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 There's the recording.
Good night, Pam.